it's always been important. It's never been unimportant. It's as you said, it's really our most valuable food additive. You couldn't run a professional kitchen without it. But over the last 50 years or so, there's been an ongoing battle against it. And it's certainly something I've always been curious about because it's pretty much my favorite food additive. Yeah, we wanted to know about just how much we've been right about salt, how much we've maybe been wrong about it. So.
Okay, we're just dropping you a little bit there, Michael. So maybe we could get you to maybe give us a brief history of what you've done, who you are, and then we'll get into the new movie and when and where we can see it. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my name is Michael McNamara. I'm the co-president of Markham Street Films, which is a company that was started by myself and my wife, Judy Holm, in the year 2000, I guess. We started it out of our house, and we've done, I don't know, dozens and dozens of documentaries, some feature films. The films have mostly been about pop culture, but we've done a number of science films over the past few years, mostly about human health. We did a film called Not Just for Kids, Adult ADHD. Another one was called The Cholesterol Question. We were looking at the new and emerging science around cholesterol and heart disease. We did another one called Lights Out, which was about the effects of light at night on human health. And more recently, we did Catwalk, which was a film about cat shows. It's basically like Best in Show, but with cats, and it's real. And that was done for the CBC. So we've done feature films, genre films. Recently, we did a film called Level 16, which is a sort of a feminist horror thriller. It was directed and written by Danishka Esterhazy, and so I'm an exec producer on that. My wife Judy was the main producer on it. So yeah, we're keeping busy, and we're always interested in stories about things that people think they know a lot about, and then we like to look at ways to kind of turn that common wisdom on its head, try and find a new way of looking at it, a new perspective. And salt is one of those things that's pretty common, and it's probably our oldest food additive. It's the one thing that is probably, well, it's certainly been a very important food preservative for centuries now. And as you mentioned, it's very much it was valuable and hard to come by at one point, and so it was basically used as currency. Apparently, the word salary comes from.
And salad, I was surprised to find that out today. Yeah, salad and celery, both the roots of salt. I see a couple of things on your resume here.
When you think about it, go ahead.
No, I just see a couple impressive resume and quite a lot of work you've done here. A couple that I ring true, sound interesting to me anyway, because you just touched on ADHD, not just for kids. That sounds interesting. And Radio Revolution, the rise and fall of the Big Eight. Is there any place we can catch this stuff after it's not on TV anymore or after its premiere?
Well, yeah, Radio Revolution was one of the first films our company made, and it's currently available on DVD, and you can find it in a couple of shops in Toronto, and one in Windsor, which is where we made the film because it's about the radio station in Windsor, and it's also available on our website. It was one of those things that because it was we had to. There was 24 pop songs in it, including Elton John, Guess Who, Alice Cooper, all these artists that were very big on that particular radio station. And so clearing the rights was important. And and we haven't really gotten around to re-clearing those rights because
Okay.
it's 24 pop songs. But the DVD is still available, and you can get it online. And one of these days, we'll figure out a way to because I think a lot of people who are interested in broadcasting and rock and roll culture and history, um, you know, will
Sounds interesting. And the ADHD, not just for
so
kids.
yeah, I've been lucky enough, yeah. So I've been lucky enough to be able to do sort of films about things that interest me. I had a friend who, he was pushing 60 and announced to me that he had just been diagnosed with ADHD, and I was completely shocked. I thought, wait a minute, isn't that just for kids? And he said, no, it's adults. Some adults have it all their lives and don't even know about it. So it was a
Mhm.
pretty so, again, that was kind of one of those stories we thought, okay, we're going to take something that everybody thinks they know about and surprise the heck out of them.
Yeah, great.
And the salt story was one of those things where we just thought, we all we use it in the kitchen. We certainly have it in our favorite snack foods, but it appears secretly in things that we didn't know there was a lot of it in, like bread, for instance. I didn't know this is that
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of salt in bread, and it's mostly because it's used to add texture to the bread. To it affects the crumb structure, and it wouldn't turn brown if you didn't have. I didn't know. So it's very important, but it does have a higher amount of salt than you would ever think. And then the question for the film was, is that a bad thing? You know?
Yeah, I did a salt experiment at one time. It was called the saltwater diet, and you just shot I don't know, it was a teaspoon of salt in warm water and drank it in the morning, and then all day you practiced at drinking half your body weight in ounces of water, I think it was. And I swear it cured my allergies. And it was strange because when you're on the diet, if you had alcohol, you had to replace it with 4 times the water. So as a result, I just didn't drink. I didn't have the time because I was drinking water so much. I couldn't fit more in. So I just gave up beer for a while. And strangely, when I went back,
Really?
when I had a couple beers here or there, the next day I had an allergy fit. And I know it wasn't the beer I'm allergic to because I'm not allergic to beer, but I have environmentals, and I was just a mess the next day. And then I stayed with
Hmm.
overhydrating for a long time. And then my environmentals just kind of disappeared. I don't get allergies anymore. I'm not sure it was that, or I just grew out of them at the same time. It was a coincidence. But I
Hmm. Hmm.
constantly, I can't remember the last time. I'm a big fan of salt. Yeah, I mean, we need
Hmm.
salt, and I think I'm one of the few people out there that's got a positive opinion of salt. And I know, I mean, there's so many false narratives out there, and I appreciate this movie so much because I'm a fan of salt. It tastes great, it makes my tongue excited for food. It doesn't matter what it is, and and you can't live without it. So I was pleased. And by the way, you got a great PR department. Thank you to her for getting me on the show. And when I'm watching it, I'm all it's not it wasn't new information for me so much, but I think a lot of people will be surprised by how much salt we actually need. And a friend of mine quoted that was in your movie, the Boston Marathon runner, was it, that collapsed and died from
Yeah.
lack of salt, too much water.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, and this is something I really don't know too much about. I mean, you're thinking about your body and health, but there's always something new to learn. And the salt is an electrolyte, and we've all heard that term when you talk about Gatorade and things like that. And what it is salt, when it mixes with it's electrolytes, when they mix with a fluid, release an electric charge. And so what happens is when you consume salt, this electric charge is basically released throughout the whole body, and it searches around inside the body looking for places that need power. And that includes the brain, it includes nerve function, muscle function, just about everything that needs energy gets it from the salt. And so uh, a marathon runner or an athlete who is losing a lot of both salt and water when they exercise or run, they if they just replenish with water and don't replenish with salt, they'll get a salt deficit, and that power is no longer available to the body, and the body collapses and just shuts down. And if you really push it, you could die. It's called hypernatremia. Um, Now, I mean, that's kind of the far end of the spectrum. And it's true that we found this when we were making the film is that the big issue for the World Health Organization, the Canadian Heart Association, the American Heart Association has been that salt is associated with high blood pressure. And the thing is, that's true, but it's only true, and we know this, it's only true for 1 in 4 people. The other 75% of the population could eat all the salt they want, and well, not all the salt they want, because it's all moderation. But they can eat all the salt they want without any um, uh, bad effects. So when you think about that, you got to think about what is it that we lose when we. I mean, it's one to say, okay, tobacco. There's no daily requirement for tobacco. And so there's no argument that it's important to cut that out of your intake. The same for chocolate. There's a number of habits that we have, but salt isn't a habit; it's a necessity. We evolved from sea-dwelling creatures, and we now carry around that sea internally because we need it, and we are constantly replenishing that. We replenish the fluids in our body, and we replenish the salt because we wind up, kind of peeing it out every day. But the way all of this works has been a source of ongoing debate. And really great minds, now this is the other thing that attracted us to this story, is that really great minds can't agree on just how salt behaves in the body, how important it is, and what the right amount is. And it turns out that you can have not only can you can go too low, certainly you can go too high, but there is a sweet spot, and it's measurably higher than what most of the health organizations have been telling us. Now, again, we're not doctors, and we shouldn't be. Nobody should take this as a golden rule. Everybody needs to kind of monitor their own intake and their own health. But and you alluded to this, a healthy diet, an enjoyable, pleasant meal is kind of I don't know, is one of the joys of being human. Being able to kind of, prepare food that looks good, tastes great, you can enjoy it with your friends, and it kind of sucks all the joy out of life if you have to remove something as important and as elemental as salt from your table. Um, so when we were making the film, um, we're looking for ways to tell a story about what goes on inside of the body, and it's always a difficult thing to do. So the film opens actually at the Stratford Chef School, which is in Stratford, Ontario, and they have a 2-year program where they train internationally recognized chefs. And so it's a really great school, great graduates, and a number of the graduates have gone on to kitchens around the world. And so they do, it's kind of like a barber college, I suppose, or a dental college, where they they try stuff out on the public. They do a 5 nights a week. They do a dinner that's open to the public, and it's like a 4-course meal with wine pairings, and it's every night is a different menu. It's a different cuisine and different head chef, and it's beautifully prepared food. And so we thought this might be a great opportunity to see how much salt goes into the preparation of a high quality meal. So we measured all the salt at the beginning of the day when they were preparing the meal to people, and then we measured it again at the end of the night to find out just how much went out the door and onto the plates. And I think most people won't be surprised that it's probably a little bit more than they would do in their own kitchen, because it was interesting to watch. I mean, there's these chefs with handfuls of salt just tossing them in. So it's they professional chefs use a lot more salt than we probably would at home. But it's a very good reason. For instance, you don't think about this, but pasta water. You're making pasta. When you add salt, you increase the boiling temperature of the water. So this is for the chemical properties, not for the flavor. It increases the temperature of the water, and so it's a higher boiling point. It cooks fast, and it comes out al dente. If you don't put salt in, it's going to come out soggy because it's going to cook more slowly and softer, and it'll just get mushy. So salt is really important. It's not there for the flavor. It's there for its chemical properties. And time and again, we saw this in the kitchen where they were using it to tenderize meat or to brine fish. And there's lots of other reasons that you use salt above and beyond just the nice hit you get off of a potato chip.
I'm glad you said that. Talk about taking one of the most important things off. When somebody comes towards the salt shaker and in my presence at a table, I get the knife out to stab them because that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's mine, and it shall not leave the front of my plate, not even for a second. So, and a friend of mine, I was at a girlfriend of mine's house the other day, and she had this half-baked bread that you put in the oven, and it finishes off, and it's really nice and crusty, and it's great warm. And she brought me over some butter, and I asked her for some salt. And she said, "Well, what's the matter? You don't I put salt on it." I almost always ask for salt for everything. And she says, "What's the matter? You don't like my unsalted butter?" I said, that's sacrilegious. There's it's unsalted. Well, I bake a lot. She says, I said, "I don't care. You should never buy unsalted butter. That's one thing." And the movie was great. It was so cute in the opening segment there. "Oh, ever tried green peas without salt?" And I think of the things that are an unsalted cracker. Are you kidding me? Unsalted butter? That's outrageous. So I'm so pleased to see the movie, and good on you. I thought it was really entertaining. But did you learn anything in your in making the movie? Don't pass the salt.
I'm sorry.
Or pass the salt.
I'm sorry. Would you?
Yeah, I wonder. How much did you learn? Did you learn anything interesting about salt in the making of the movie? Am I still cutting out?
Yeah. Well, what did we learn? That's a good question. This is the thing. When I make a science film, I'm not a scientist. I'm a storyteller and a filmmaker. So whenever I make a science film, I become an expert for like about a year and a half, and then as soon as I start working on a new one, all the old stuff goes out of my head. I completely forgot everything I know about ADHD or cholesterol, all those other things. So for the moment, I'm a salt expert, but I won't be a month from now. But I really never thought about the notion of salt as both a chemical resource when in the kitchen, but certainly it's important for all kinds of. It goes into steel making. It goes into we couldn't go into all of this. But, I mean, our primary objective was to talk about it in the diet, and there were things I just had never really considered about it before. But it's one of the interesting things we found out was there was a study that was done, and this is I think one of the things that triggered us looking into this in the first place. There was a study done in Moscow with where they did a simulated flight to Mars, and they had Russian cosmonauts basically locked in a simulated space station for a period of about 13 months. And doing studies of diet are really difficult because all you can rely on is people's food diaries. The only other, and most scientific studies require isolation. You need to isolate your subject from the rest of the world and from outside sources. So this was a perfect opportunity to really look closely at what was going into the body and coming out of the body. And so a team of German scientists came just to do that, to control all the food intake, to control the salt. And then they experimented with how much salt they would put into the diet and to see how it was processed in the body. And they were shocked at the things that they discovered about salt. For one thing, they found that we store salt. They never knew this before. They always thought that one of the reasons you need to you have the taste for salt is because you need to constantly be replenishing it because you can't store salt the way you store fat. Well, it turns out you can, but they can't figure out why. It's not. It basically is going into other parts of the body that have nothing to do with this electrolyte system I was talking about. They found that it's being stored in the skin. So we actually went to the people that ran the study are now doing follow-up studies in Singapore. So I got to go to Singapore and film the research they're doing there. And they have MRIs that they've retuned to look for sodium in the body. And so you climb in and they scan you, and they can actually see the salt in the muscle tissue and in the skin. And they found that the older you get, the more you store. And again, they can't quite figure out why. They suspect it's because, as we know, salt attracts water, and they suspect it's there to hold the water in the body because as the older we get, apparently, the leakier we get in terms of our skin. So this is why we get wrinkles, because the skin can no longer hold on to the moisture. And so they think the salt is there to essentially trap the moisture in the body and in the skin to keep it from dehydrating. So that's pretty cool. And the thing about salt is that there is no, it's not binary. It's not on or off. It's not yes or no. It's, on one hand, it's really our most important condiment. On the other hand, it's potentially harmful for some people. It will preserve food, but will also, anybody who's ever been through a Canadian winter knows that it'll destroy your pant cuffs and your your shoes and your boots and your car. It'll cause salt and rust and so on. So it can degrade and erode and cause all kinds of sort of problems. But at the same time, it's kind of the Jekyll and Hyde of our foodstuffs. And I think this is one of the reasons why it continues to be a source of argument for great minds. They don't all think alike when it comes to salt. So it was really interesting to kind of like jump feet first into that ongoing debate.
Michael McNamara is my guest. He's the director of Pass the Salt. Did you any industry feedback at all, Michael? I've never heard of a salt lobby.
Well, in fact, there is. There's actually a guy. If you look online, there's a guy who's known as the Salt Guru, and he's his last name is spelled the same as Satan, S-A-T-I, and he's a guy who's, I think he's originally from Canada, but he's very, very much in the kind of the salt lobby. I mean, the thing is, and I have to admit, when we went looking to do this story, we were contacting manufacturers and people who work in the food industry to get access to, so we could get some interesting visuals, and also so we contacted a couple of different salt companies that produce kosher salt, for instance, and it was really difficult to get access. I mean, and in the end, we didn't get as much access as we would like because they're all suspicious. They're all worried that we're going to slag them, because the ongoing message has been that salt is to be demonized, and certainly we went in this trying to find a way to understand why that might be and understand whether or not it's been fairly and justly demonized. And so far, everything we found points to it was kind of an easy target, I think. There was a lot of. I mean, the thing about nutrition is that it's really still a kind of we're still beginners when it comes to knowing just how things work. I mean, every couple of years there's a new one. You need red wine in your diet. It'll clean out your pipes. Oh no, you shouldn't be drinking any alcohol. I mean, coffee is good for you. Coffee isn't good for you. High fat, low fat, high carb diet, all those things. So every once in a while, one of these things comes up, and you got to, like, excuse the pun, you got to think about it take it with a grain of salt. And the thing about this particular message is that it's stuck as long as it has. It's been I mean, the thing is, they debunked all those other ones I'm talking about, but the
Mm.
salt one continues to be a real bone of contention. And in fact, you mentioned at the beginning, somebody saying, "Have you ever had peas without salt?" There was a man named Dr. Clyde Yancey, who's at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago. He was the head of the American Heart Association, and he wrote an article because he went looking for new research to find out whether or not there was a benefit to cutting back salt in your diet, especially for people who had already had heart disease. And they couldn't find any evidence, none. And so he wrote this article saying we've got to stop telling our patients to remove salt from their diets because it has all kinds of unintended consequences. It's not a cheap thing to have a good healthy diet that is salt free. For one thing, you pretty much have to cook all your food from scratch because only 10% of the salt that winds up in our diets on average comes from the salt shaker on your table or in your kitchen. The rest of it comes from industrial food sources, the bread that you buy at the bakery. A lot of salt goes into bread making. And again, it's not there just for flavor. It's there because it helps the crust uh, turn brown. It adjusts the crumb texture. It, it tempers yeast activity. It does all these important things that have nothing to do with the way it tastes. So it's there are a lot of unintended consequences to removing salt from the diet, and so it was kind of a shock when Dr. Yancey wrote this editorial telling people that until we have better evidence, we need to knock it off and be careful about the kinds of pronouncements that we make. And that was a shock to a lot of the medical community. So certainly we wanted to talk to him. Um, it's a it's really interesting when you have, and I can't think of anything else that has been so contentious for as long as it has been. Then something as simple as oh, how much, how little, is there a sweet spot, and it's a so it's been an interesting challenge to tell this story.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you mentioned so many things. There's been conspiracies on so many products. The fat intake, animal fats, good for us. We know now. Butter, even. Eat margarine. Eat margarine? Are you kidding? It's like a petroleum product for crying out loud. And salt will give you high blood pressure. Well, is that actually untrue? Are we, and who's going to dial it back? And who stands to be the beneficiary of people getting the message and going, yay, salt. So I'm going, and when I was on my salt water diet,
Mm.
if I forgot to do a shot in the morning, it was just a small shot of salt water. The idea was just salt your food, heavily salt your food afterwards, which is never a problem. Um, and so many things. I mean, French fries, you name it. You can't eat unsalted. And it's
Yeah.
really amazing to me when you say 10% comes from the salt shaker. Wow, that blows my mind.
Mm.
And I get the yeast temperament. I didn't know about the browning of the bread and stuff like that, but that's
Mm.
hey, the crust is the best part. A nice crunchy crust.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so it's just one of those things that you just really we take for granted, and it at the root of all of this has been this idea that salt has an effect on your blood pressure, and it's true. High amounts of salt, really high amounts of salt, can affect your blood pressure. But when it comes to moderate amounts of salt, only 1 in 4 people or 1 in 5, depending upon who you talk to, are salt sensitive and will have a high blood pressure reaction to sodium intake. The other 75% of us really don't need to worry that much as long as we maintain a moderate amount. And it's kind of like, sort of hitting a fly with a sledgehammer. I mean, you to make pronouncements about something that is just so fundamental to the way we live and the way we eat and our cuisine around the world really relies on it. The Korean food is really salty. Certainly French and Italian cooking really, they would just look at you. I mean, a bruschetta, what you got the tomatoes, you got the olive oil. you got to have some salt on that, or just, for color, for texture, for flavor. It just intensifies, and enhances and it's true that 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people will probably have some kind of a blood pressure reaction to that. And they need to watch themselves. But it's very much an individual. It's one of those things, when you're telling these kinds of stories, people say, okay, well, so what's the final word on this? Is it good or bad? And the answer is yes. It's so it's good or bad depending upon how much and who you are and what your ethnicity is too. There may be some of it may be some populations may be more salt sensitive than others, and they're still kind of figuring that out. So it's important not to 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 really look at the way it affects you personally, and only because I'm not a doctor, and I just play one on television, and so.
Yeah, I found it interesting. The guys out in BC that were actually, well, they say they weren't making salt because salt's been here long before humans were here, but they were taking the salt out of the fresh sourced saltwater sea in BC. And what's your reaction been? Do people just throw up their hands and go, okay, I'm back on salt, or do they resist and dig in and say, wow, you might think it's okay, but
Yeah, that's a good question. The film hasn't premiered as of at the moment. Anyway, we get to get any kind of reaction from the public. We've only been showing it to friends and so on. And let's face it, most of us, as Canadians, we have the average Canadian salt intake is somewhere between 3.5 grams and 5 grams, so
and so what would that be in
3,500
a tablespoon?
milligrams. And that is basically about a tablespoon and a half, or a teaspoon and a half of salt, give or take.
Okay.
And the American Heart Association, the Canadian Heart Association, they want us to go down to less than a half a teaspoon. Not a lot, and it doesn't go very far. And so there has been, this is the other reason why there's been this kind of contention about it, which is like, that low, not only are you affecting, the pleasures of good, healthy eating, that's another thing. You mentioned peas. There are some cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, for instance, or Brussels sprouts, that not all that tasty until you sprinkle a little bit of salt on them. Completely transforms the way, it tempers the bitterness. Eggplant, it's another. It completely transforms the dish and makes it so. These are all healthy foods that you would probably be eating more of if you put a pinch of salt on it. So this kind of fear of salt is really uh, unfounded. So.
Now, David Suzuki narrated the film. I hope I'm not giving too much away, and I'd like you to give us some information as far as where we can see it. But he said a pinch of salt. I just brought my trusty salt shaker out here because I have one in my desk. I eat at my office desk so often that I have a salt shaker.
Wow.
And I'm just looking. He said a pinch of salt can contain 1,000 granulars or grains of salt. I was thinking in my mind, that sounds like a lot. And I'm just looking here, I just put 20 or 40 on my desk here, and man, it doesn't seem like 1,000 grains would fit in a pinch. It must be a big pinch.
Well, yeah. It depends on what kind of salt it is too, because table salt compared to kosher salt, for instance, the volume is very different. You can take an ounce of one and an ounce of the other, and they'll be very different in terms of the density. And so this has become a kind of a problem with, and it's why kosher salt has become kind of the standard for kitchens and for chefs and for recipes. A lot of people will use a recipe and use table salt, and they'll find that the dish is completely over salted. That's the other interesting thing about salt is one little pinch can can transform and make it, enhance the flavors of a dish. One pinch too many can render it inedible, and it's a kind of I can't think of anything else that's like that. I mean, there's sweet and there's sweeter, but there's salt and there's too salty, so it's a very interesting, very complicated, complex but simple on the surface substance, and it's been really an interesting challenge to tell this story. It's but
Yeah,
fun.
that's an interesting point you brought up there. Your unsalted dish goes from something's just a little missing here. Maybe salt will take care of it. Salt almost always does. And then to the point where if you oversalt it, it's ruined. You don't even want to go near it. You would eat an
Yeah.
an undersalted dish with no trouble. It's just kind of,
Mhm.
you're hoping for a little spice there, but then if you get too much, I wonder, did you come across, when we're talking about different salts in the film, some salt being fluffy, and I wonder if you saw a distinction between iodized salt, which everyone seems to think is evil, to the gray salt that I use in the kitchen. I actually roll it out with a rolling pin on a wooden board to get it to come down. And the gray salt is loaded in nutrients, apparently very, very good for you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, at its very root, salt is salt. So it's all about the sodium, and that gives the flavor, and also may be causing the health issues. And different salts, you're right, will come with different. I mean, there's really no difference between sea salt, for instance, and salt that comes from a mine. They all basically,
Come
because
from the sea.
mine salt started out as sea salt. Yeah. So there's no difference in terms of the health aspects, but you're right. The way it's been processed, the way whether things have been added to it or not. There's smoked salts. There's sea salt that's been naturally dehydrated using the sun, as opposed to and there's fleur de sel that you get in France and so on. And then there's a lot of the sea salt that's produced in climates like Canada's are done using big vats that boil down and reduce and remove all the water, and then create these beautiful crystalline. You mentioned the one in BC. It's beautiful salt, really really lovely, highly prized. We filmed when we were in Singapore. We filmed at a soy sauce factory, not really a factory, as it was a sort of a boutique operation, a family operation that's been using traditional methods for making the soy sauce. And that was from soy sauce was invented to kind of stretch salt back in the days when salt was very expensive
Okay.
and hard to find. And what they found though is they do it in these big casks out in the sun, and then over a period of years, what happens is salt crust builds up inside the vats, and so every few years or so they harvest that and produce this amazing brown, rich flavored, textured soy salt. And you'd love this stuff. It's
Soy
really good.
salt.
Um, yeah, and adds an amazing flavor to. I mean, even a little bit on that on ice cream is pretty amazing.
Ice
So,
cream. Wouldn't it melt at all?
oh yeah, yeah. No, you'd eat it too fast. I mean, you'd eat it before it melted. It's I mean, that's the other surprising thing. I mean, things like salted caramel, for instance, which have become very hot, in the last few years. And this mixture of sweet and savory and salty is really an attractive thing. Uh, I have another thing lined up in a couple of minutes, so I'm going to have to
Oh, great.
wrap it up
Okay.
very
Well,
short.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. It's funny, just on the way out, when you say salty, sweet. That's what my brother, when we binge snack, it's salty, sweet, salty. You go from one to another. Tell us where we can find the film. Where and when can we see it, Michael?
Well, the film premieres on the 17th on the CBC at 9 p.m. The Nature of Things with David Suzuki, and then it'll be available on GEM, and I think also on the CBC website eh, online. So it's pretty much as soon as it goes to air, you'll be able to find it in other places like GEM. And if you, the GEM is, I think, a downloadable app, or you can also just kind of watch it on your computer.
Yeah.
Um,
Great.
but if you want to like watch it on your good old fashioned television, you can do that too. So on Friday night.
Awesome. Michael McNamara was my guest. He is the director of Paths Assault on CBC, January 19th?
It's Friday, so what is that? The 17th, I think.
17th, 9. I'll get the details to you. Anyways, Michael, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Good luck with the film, and I hope you get a good reaction out of it. All right, sir. Have a good day.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers. You're welcome. I don't know how to stop this thing now. Stop video. That'll do. All right, cool. Michael McNamara, if you need him. Forgot to ask where he was. Oh, he's in Stratford, Ontario. So yeah, it came in today just to talk about his film. January 17th, 9:30 on CBC. Check it out. Pass the Salt is the film. And stop demonizing salt, man. Salt's good for you. It's great for you. Eat it every day. And okay, so I'm still rolling. Can I just go back to the video? Okay, so maybe I was recording or something. Maybe I wasn't. Okay, we're gonna save this. We'll upload it later. Thank you for the people that tuned in on YouTubes. And we'll upload this copy, another copy later that's got the microphones and a little bit better audio. Sorry, we didn't have a great Wi-Fi signal on Michael's end. I think it was his end. He was cutting out just a little bit there, and I seem to be pretty clear. So thank you to Michael McNamara. He is the director of Pass the Salt. Check it on CBC, 9:30, Friday, January 17th. On the Nature of Things, narrated by the one and only David Suzuki. That's it for now. So we're going to check out of here and say bye-bye. How do you stop the recording? And end meeting. There we go. Click end meeting.